Hi, my name's Corinne Brad. Welcome to the Crafts channel, and today I would like to show you how to make these petaled drawstring bags. They're made very simply from 2 squares of fabric and they open very smoothly, and you can just pop little gifts in them. You can make them on a larger scale and use them as a knitting bag if you wanted, so you could hang it on your wrist and stop your balls of wool rolling away, and they just close up like this. Great for treat bags, presents, goodie bags for parties. You need 2 squares of fabric the same size. So I have here a nice tropical zebra and flamingo print. I'm going to back it with a a lighter flamingo print. And these 2 squares are 30 centimetres square, that's 12 inches. I'm just going to pin them together at the corners so they don't slip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew all the way around the outside with a 5mm seam allowance. But I'm going to leave a gap, sort of about a 5 centimetre gap in the middle of one edge so that I can turn it out. So we'll go to our sewing machine. This is set on a 2mm long straight stitch, and I'm going to use the edge of my presser foot here as a seam guide to my 5mm and start just past the middle of one side, a couple of locking stitches at the back, and then just sew straight to the corner. Make sure your needle is down in the fabric before you lift up this presser foot to pivot your fabric 90 degrees. And then before you carry on sewing, for goodness sake, make sure your presser foot is back down again, otherwise your stitches will go loopy and awful. Carry on right down this side. Again, needle down, press the foot up, pivot, press the foot back down again. And in fact, it was only the other day that I suddenly realised that my presser foot was set to slow speed. So I've turned it back up to high, and it's incredible how much time I've saved by actually sewing quicker. And then when you get back to the edge that you started on, don't forget that you need to leave that gap. So this is where I was. I'm going to stop just in the middle of that zebra's body. Like so. So you've sewn your square in almost like a cushion cover. And then what you want to do to make nice crisp corners is you just want to snip off a triangle of fabric at the corner, taking care not to actually snip through the stitching that you've already done. And then pop your hand in the hole. And turn the whole shebang right side out. Ease out those corners with your thumb and finger, and then if you can either use a point turner or the blade, a pair of scissors. Don't be tempted to use that pointy blade of the pair of scissors to turn your corners out, because you will just rip a hole through your fabric. And you can get a nice square corner without actually having too much of a point. There you go. And ideally, once you've done that, what you do want to do really is you want to press this seam. But in true, I haven't got time for that fashion. I'm just going to roll it so it's right out of the seam. and just pin it in a couple of places. And on this edge here, where you have your gap, if you just fold those raw edges in line with your seam line, and pull it nice and taut. Let's get rid of that bit of thread there. In fact, let's just tuck it inside. And you can pin this, because what we're going to do in a sec is we're just going to top stitch this edge so that it keeps a nice crisp line and you get a nice crisp petal shape when you create the drawstring. Here we go. Now, in an ideal world, when you top stitch this, it would be nice to choose a colour of thread that coordinated with the fabric that you're using. But for speed and to save time rethreading the machine, I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to change my presser foot from my normal one that I use to this one here that's an overlock foot. The reason I'm using it is because it's got a great little guide on the edge, and it means that you can sew really close to the edge without falling off. So again, I'm going to start in the middle of a line, needle down and back stitch, and I'm going to change the stitch length on this as well, because it's a top stitch, it's a decorative stitch, but it's not actually there to hold things together or hold seams together. I'm going to change it to a 4mm stitch. And you top stitch it in exactly the same way that you join the pieces in the first place. Oh, run off the edge a bit there. Wasn't really looking what I was doing. The one thing that I always find, especially if you're using a longer than normal stitch, is I can never judge just where I should stop at the end of a seam to turn a corner. And because I want to try and keep the seam allowance the same, sometimes I have to have a bit of a fiddle about to make sure the needle just goes in at the right place. So we're back to the beginning. So it's all nicely top stitched. I'm just going to change my foot back before I forget. And then what you need to do is you need to create the channels for your drawstring. Now, if you fold your piece of fabric into 3 and just finger press it, like so, you can then, let's just get rid of here. You can then see where the third of a way, you know what I mean, like the 1/3 marks are around the edges, Actually, you don't even need to fold it into 3D. If you know the size of your fabric, you can just measure around the edges. I'm just going to make pin marks on this lighter colour where it divides it into 3. And then I'm going to simply sew from pin mark to pin mark in a diagonal. So in effect what you're doing is you're sewing across the corners, each of the 4 corners of the square. Just take those pins out before I run over them with the sewing machine and break my needle. I'm just going to flip it over because you can now see a little bit more clearly where those stitch marks are. And what I want to do is I then want to sew in from that stitch mark. So I'm going to use, again, the edge of my foot as a guide, but I'm just going to sew it about 4mm bigger so that it creates a drawstring channel. And I'm only sewing this on the darker side of the fabric this time so that I can actually see where the stitch line is, because against that white it's quite difficult. There you go. Now that should be all of your sewing done. I'm just going to trim off these ends. You really are best to trim off the ends of the thread as you go along. And certainly give it one more check over before you put a gift in it and present it to somebody. So you've now got some, oh look, there's more here. You've now got 4 diagonal channels around the edge of your squares of fabric. If you just get yourself a small pair of scissors, and you need to snip this fabric just with inside the stitching, like so. And you snip it on the inside of the bag because I'm going to have the flamingos as the inner lining. And it doesn't need to be a huge hole, it just needs to be big enough that you can get a safety pin through it, because that's what you're going to use to thread your drawstring through. And also what you'll find is because where you've snipped is actually all encased by stitching, it's not going to fray. You're not going to end up with the bag falling apart. So just bear with me while I snip these other corners. And if you're using a small pointy pair of scissors, try not to go right through both layers of fabric, because you only want the hole, the threading hole on the lining. One more channel to do. There we go. Then get yourself some satin cord. Hook it onto a safety pin and then ease it through the channels, which you have hopefully made big enough. Yeah. Oh. And you can guarantee it doesn't matter how big you've made that hole, it's never going to be quite the right size. So keep gathering it through like this. And what you do is you put it through in one direction. Actually, I'll show you the whole thing rather than trying to explain it. Here we go. And then you draw up your drawstring. Let's just take that off of there a sec. I nearly pulled that out of the channel then, that would have been fun. About here. And then just tie it in an overhand knot. So you can pull it tight and then open your petals out. Now in an ideal world, what I would do is then thread another length through the bag, but starting on the opposite side of the knot, so that essentially what you get is you have 2 knots either side of the bag, so it opens and closes really simply. But seeing as how long it took me to thread that satin cord through there in the first place, you understand what I mean. And as I say, if you have a lack of satin cord, what you can do is you can just simply tighten it up like this and then secure the closure with a little slip knot loop, like so. Fill it with sweets and treats, and you've got a great little diddy bag there. Perfect little gift bag. So I hope you enjoyed that demonstration. I hope you can see how easy it is to make a bag out of simply 2 squares of fabric, and you can add rick-rack trim to your petals if you want. You can tie it with ribbon. It's entirely up to you. But we will see you again next time. I'll have more sewing ideas for you, so I hope you join us again. Thanks very much. Bye. If you've been inspired to create, please share your makes with us in the comments section below. And if you've enjoyed videos by the Crafts channel, hit the like button. Want to see more of us? Then click subscribe. See you next time.